Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I know some folks are still getting lunch and coming in, but we're going to get started. I'm Dr. Schaff, and I'm the director of the HEAL program, Humanities, Ethics, Art, and Law. I want to welcome all of you, and especially our first-year students, because this is the first time you've been to an art and medicine event. These events are aligned with the core medical school curriculum. So some of our students are currently studying neurosciences, and this is an opportunity to understand a little bit more about that system from another perspective. And we hope that these events will enhance understanding between patients and future healthcare professionals. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Petzinger, who's here to represent the clinicians who take care of patients with Parkinson's disease. And I'm going to turn things over to our artist in residence, Ted Meyer, who will introduce our artist and tell us about her and begin the show. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is our artist, Safi Alia Shabaik. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
And we're very lucky to have this show. The show was originally sponsored by the Parkinson's Foundation and the NEA, so we're really excited that it's here. But before we get to that, I always start for the first-year students who are still trying to figure out what you guys want to do with your medical career. We always start with a little information so you know whether or not you can make a living at this later on down the road. So, Parkinson's, each year, 60,000 people are diagnosed with Parkinson's in the United States, and there's more than 10 million in the world with Parkinson's. 4% of the people are diagnosed below 50. So it's, you always think of these mobility issues as later in life, but a lot of them are younger. And over 4,000 people died from Parkinson's in California in 2021. And the cost to treat it is almost $50 billion in the United States. All right. Normally in the show, we have an artist talking to a doctor, but this time we have an artist who was also a caregiver who did a project with her father about Parkinson's. And if you haven't had a chance to go downstairs and look at the work, you can do that after the show. So let's start with the title, Personality Crash, which is really descriptive and really accurate. And maybe you could start by talking about how it relates to your dad and tell us a little bit about your dad, his history, when he started showing symptoms and when he finally passed.
Okay. My father, he's from Egypt. He was born and raised in Egypt, Cairo. He came to America for higher education, for grad school. Met my mom in Berkeley. This is really like sped up timeline of my dad's life, but met my mom at Cal, UC Berkeley in the late 60s, moved to LA, was a professor of mechanical engineering, materials science at UCLA. He was tenured there, so he was there for a long time. Raised a family in LA, and was a very vibrant, robust person, beloved. He was second oldest of 7 kids, first one to leave his native country and start a life in a new country. Also carved a path for his younger siblings to do the same, and he has his 2 youngest brothers followed suit and did move eventually to America and also to California. They're here nearby. My dad started to show symptoms, initial symptoms. I guess it was like around the age of maybe 69. It was in 2007, 2008, and I was living in New York at the time, and my mom didn't know what was going on with my dad, and she reached out to me and said, I see things changing with him. I don't really know what's happening with him. And at that point, I decided to move back and help her figure out what was happening with my dad. We eventually got him in to see a doctor. He saw a neurologist. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's. At that time, he was still really autonomous and did not need hands-on caregiving. He lived with the diagnosis for about I'd say like 9 years before his death. He died on the first day of 2018. And it was really the last 2 years of his life that other diseases started to manifest. So at that, I would say 2 years out from his death, I started to see signs of the dementia. And I would say something to my mom about it, my sister, and they didn't really see what I was seeing. So, it wasn't a consistent experience with him. There were just moments at that time. I would say in the last 6 months of his life is when the sundowning presented itself, or when we learned about sundowning, because he actually had escaped from the house. And escaped maybe isn't the right word, but because we weren't keeping him confined in the house, but he, at that time in his life, needed hands-on assistance. He needed people to help him out of the bed and, with basic functions like, dressing and showering and feeding. And he was not able to walk on his own at that time. He needed a rollator or a walker or a wheelchair, and he needed assistance getting to those devices from the bed. But he actually went missing from the house, which is how we learned about sundowning. He got out the door and down the block without any devices or any assistance. And he died when he was 80. What have I missed as far as?
That's it.
Okay.
So, especially for the first-year students who are just learning about the gallery downstairs, we tie it to the curriculum, and every once in a while we'll have different artists over the years who have the same illness, and I'm always impressed by the variety of ways patient artists approach their illness. And I look at your work, which has gotten like great reviews. The New York Times reviewed it and talked about how powerful it is. And I think of my brother who died of Parkinson's. He was 60, and early on I took 1 or 2 pictures of him, and he's like, "Don't take any more pictures of me." He had actually had somebody on the street think he was homeless because of the way he was walking once, and he was very particular about how he looked going forward. But you and your dad decided to do this together. He was all in. It's not objectifying him. You're telling his story. So why don't you talk about the conversation you guys had to tell his story?
Right, and also you asked me about personality crash. I didn't address that, so I will talk about all those things. So early on in my dad's diagnosis, when he was still autonomous, we talked about doing a project together. I wanted to actually tell his story about how he had come to America and, kind of lived the American dream and was, successful, created a family, bought a home, two children and the pets and, the whole American dream that people come to live here. And in the process of me trying to chronicle that story with him, that was actually a video project I was trying to do with him, I saw the difficulties he was having in just talking about those things and, sitting for certain periods of time to do that, and just, he just didn't have the stamina to go through all of that. And I realized that maybe the story we need to tell is the story of his journey now. And I talked to him about that, and he was amenable to that. I mean, my dad was an educator, in life. And if his story could help other people, I think he was always game to educate, He, in the last, I think it was in the last 6 months, it was definitely the last year of his life, the title of the project was just the Papa Project. That was the working title because we didn't have a title. And it was still, forming, and the story was still being told. And there was a day when I took him to the bathroom, and he wanted me to get a piece of paper and a pencil for him, and I handed him those objects while he was sitting there, and he was doing something with them, and I looked at the paper, and I saw that he was just making lines on the paper. It's like he had forgotten how to use the pencil. And I asked him if he wanted me to take notes, and he said yes. And he started talking to me about personality crashes, and I didn't know what that meant, and I tried to quiz him and just ask, like, what is that? Who's having one? Is it me? Is it somebody else? And basically, he said that he was aware that he was unaware that he was losing himself. That's, to him, how he explained a personality crash. And in that moment, I realized that he was very aware of what was happening to himself, and that we also had a fantastic name for the project. It was so it was so poetic and telling of his own experience with Parkinson's.
Dr. Petzinger, before we get into the artwork and your view of the artwork, can you talk to us a little bit about when you see Parkinson's patients, what's typical of the first time they come to you where they realize something's, is it a movement, is it a memory loss? When somebody walks into your office, what brought them there?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people are more familiar with Parkinson's disease as a movement problem, or maybe shaking, but actually that's not needed. It's usually something with mobility. However, what we do know is actually Parkinson's disease is a third leading cause of dementia, is a disorder of dementia after Alzheimer's and stroke. So cognitive changes are actually a part of Parkinson's, but it doesn't get as much attention as the movement part because there's no treatment for it, you see. We can treat a bit the movement, but we can't treat dementia or thinking problems for any, whether that's TBI, whether that's vascular, it doesn't really matter, mental health related. We have no effective compounds for thinking. And so we describe it, maybe, we hear about it, but we're not as proactive about it. And I study lifestyle, which is a whole nother thing that doesn't get enough attention. But the idea that cognitive changes happen in Parkinson's disease is actually known. And that happens in about 40% of people upon diagnosis. They're already having this issue, and we call that mild cognitive impairment. In that case, what makes this kind of, it's a slow disorder. So when we describe mild cognitive impairment, people may begin themselves to notice something, but that doesn't mean they're functionally impaired, right? They can still do things, but it doesn't feel right to them, right? And one of the telltale signs is they may begin to start noticing they aren't coming up with the words fast enough, or they're not able to keep up with conversations. And they feel kind of awkward about it. They may not even tell anybody about it, and they start becoming less participatory in communicating with people. You start noticing that, and they start noticing it a bit. So it's kind of these awkward moments where this person that you knew really appears to be withdrawing, understandably. They're not able to as effectively communicate as they like. So communication in Parkinson's disease is a big issue because of the need to be able to process and come up with words quickly. That is the heart of really what Parkinson's is. It's the slowness. We call that bradyphrenia. We think of bradykinesia, slow movement. But slowness in thinking is very common. And again, they can still be functioning day to day, but it's harder to do that until we get to the point where it is functionally impairing, and then we call that dementia. So functional impairment is by definition now dementia. The other thing that we know about thinking, which also doesn't get a lot of attention, is that thinking is very much a movement-related issue. So we see movement problems, and we believe it's strictly a movement issue, right? It's a physicality issue. It's not being able to walk effectively. But the truth is, movement is also very much a cognitive process. So when we see people having issues with tripping or falling, that is also a manifestation of thinking problems, right? So it's not recognized because it's not necessarily talked about by the person. They're embarrassed or don't want to, ashamed, or it's just hard maybe to express what they're going through. And also it may manifest in other ways, including things like mobility itself. And the final thing is mood. So mood, such as depression and anxiety, are actually very much interrelated with cognition as well. They're kind of different sides of the coin. So depression and anxiety have kind of this other aspect of cognition. So my point is, all these things really are cognitive. They're expressed in different ways. So by the time we're seeing dementia, the truth is they have been manifesting, but we may not be as aware of it as, because it's a slow process. And kind of to your point, something is different. He knows something different, but right. Being able to express that can be really hard. I think
being aware of that.
Aware of that.
He may not know exactly what is changing in him, and he may not be aware that he is thinking slower. And also on the point of communication, something that does go along with Parkinson's is a little voice. Like the voice becomes weaker and smaller, and so again, people don't always hear you when you're trying to communicate. And again, also, you're medical students, so you're probably more aware of this than the larger public, but lots of people think about Parkinson's as the shaking disease, and it's not. It's with my dad, it manifested in rigidity, muscle rigidity and stiffness, and the inability to move, inability to swallow, inability to open his eyes, And the medicine is what gives him the dyskinesia. And that's what people see when they see, Michael J. Fox on TV or, Muhammad Ali or the faces of Parkinson's that are well recognized by the larger public. They're seeing them with the medicine, giving them the dyskinesia and thinking that that's what the disease is.
Although sorry, not to be a pain, but dyskinesia is Parkinson's as well.
Okay.
That's not even
okay,
drug.
not for my dad. His manifestation of it was rigidity, and then when he had the medicine in his system, he became dyskinetic.
Yeah, but actually the dyskinesia is because of changes in the brain and the response of the drug.
Okay.
Yeah, so it gets a little weird, but yeah, actually that's still Parkinson's, but I understand what you're saying.
Without the medicine, he did not have the dyskinesia.
Yes, totally understand that. totally get what you're going.
Okay, that's my
totally.
Experience.
Yes, absolutely. And I think to your point, what people also don't appreciate, which is what you're saying. I mean, dopamine has limitations, right? It helps with stiffness, it helps with slowness. It's not a cognitive compound per se. It may help a little bit of the processing, but as we talked about, we don't have cognitive compounds. That is the limit. That is why we're, neuroscience, the biggest thing in neuroscience right now, and it's been that way all along, but it is cognitive. We do not understand thinking. We are still so far away from it. You see that in the Alzheimer's field. These drugs are not efficacious. I don't care how much money they're making off of it. They don't work. And so we still have to understand that. And then obviously things like lifestyle, social contact, keeping them cognitively engaged as much as we can. Having that social support is ginormous for them. What you guys were doing is what you should be doing, and you are doing that. I mean, to help him lead the most dignified life he can with everything we can do, right? I think those are important messages, and you relay that so well in your photography. It's just amazing how you've been able to translate that into a picture.
So speaking of the photography, and I'm going to get back to sort of caregiving and your side of it versus your side, but I want to talk about this series of photos because, when you get to, you were just talking about the voice getting very quiet, and that happened with my brother. We couldn't talk the last year of his life, but you guys are sort of communicating here just by your feet and touching, and I think it's a really sweet series, so maybe you could
talk about that. There were just moments of humor, I think, and playfulness that my dad still embodied during this experience. And, back also about talking about, I don't think I addressed this either, talking about doing the project. My dad had been the family photographer when I was growing up, and so he had a relationship with a camera, and I had had a camera in my hand since I was young. So he understood my relationship with the camera. And so for us to do this together, to bridge the gap of disease and who he had been prior to disease, felt like a natural progression. And so he did trust me that way. And again, he was, in his beginning phases of everything. So he was pretty much in his right mind and was willing to explore this journey with me together through the lens. And as Ted mentioned, my dad was an active participant throughout the whole thing up until his death day. There were times when I felt like I couldn't have the camera because I really needed to have two hands on him, and he would tell me to go get the camera to make photos. And so, I think it gave him a sense of importance, a sense of dignity, a sense of value at a time when he felt like his value was dropping. And I think this photo represents the kind of playful humor and this relationship, this tight, close-knit relationship that we had during the process of not only making the photos, but also me being our role reversal. Our role reversal of me becoming his caregiver, becoming his parent at this stage in his life.
That's perfect lead into the next question, and let's go to these. We'll come back. I'm going to go to these photos. So both of you were in the family, and you have to deal with a lot of families, and I think Parkinson's especially is good for all the new students because one person has it, but it affects the whole family. It affects their finances, it affects their time, who's going to be the caregiver. There's a lot of energy. So first, maybe you could talk about when you're talking to people about this diagnosis, letting them know what they're in for, that it's not only long-term, but it's going to affect everybody.
Absolutely. I can't tell you, I mean, we're not really trained well to do that. You know, it requires practice. I've been fortunate enough that I've worked with palliative care. We now have a palliative care program that's growing here. And it's been very helpful for me because I'm kind of a cup half full kind of person. I'm like all about lifestyle and let's just get out there and work out and keep it going. And right, it's hard for me to think about, death, right? And I have had a number of patients of my past. I actually I don't go to the funerals. I can't take it when I do. It's too hard for me because I'm so close to them. It's challenging to be able to think about this person and try to think about everything you're going to try to do to help them. And I think the way that I've started rethinking it through, because there are challenges, is I keep thinking about being the best version of you. You know what I mean? And that changes, right? And that also involves a lot of social support. I mean, Sophie's amazing. She has an amazing family and lots of love. You can feel that in the way she's talking and the pictures that we're seeing. Having that sort of thing is meaningful. And so you go back to think about what is meaningful in people's lives. And I think that's what we think about with any type of chronic illness. We have to keep having this discussion over and over again of what is it that's important to you, right? What is your network? How can I be here to help? As physicians, we are not the health solution. We are a person in this person's lives. We're there to be supportive. We're there to help with any type of resources we can do. We work as a team. We work with palliative care as much as we can because they also have other skill sets that we can use. I think I've certainly learned as a physician that it really is a team effort with the patient and their family at the center of that because they're the ones living it day to day. If you want to learn anything about these photos, the take-home message is this is day-to-day life that we don't get to see, right, when they come into the clinic. This is reality, right? And being able to look at that and remember that as a physician and being able to have these sorts of conversations that are important. I think the other point you bring up, Safi, is helping the patient find a voice when they don't have a voice. In this case, in Parkinson's, Safi became his voice, right, to help us to be able to still communicate with the patient, even when it's hard, when it gets hard to do. You know, again, these are all the things, you don't get taught this, right? You need to get other people to help teach you this, and you learn from other people, including families and patients themselves. They're sometimes your best teacher to learn how to be kind of a better person, if that makes sense.
And on that note, I mean, I didn't know any of this beforehand either. This was a first-time journey for our family, so I was learning as I was watching my dad degrade and trying to figure out what was going on with him, and having to deal with the medical system and the doctors and the, hospice when we eventually switched to hospice. And that's very challenging for a family. And, all I can ask of you who are going to be launched into the medical field to help, families like this is just please exercise your deepest compassion and empathy with them. The hospice doctor who came in to sign the papers with us and, do the initial exam with my dad was very kind of cavalier about it all. And, kind of said, well, he probably has a month to live. And, it's like an average day for her. And for us, this was a life-changing diagnosis, and this decision to even go on to hospice was very, very, this was not a good day in our household. This was a really tough decision. And it was very difficult for us. And for her, it was just, an average day. And she seemed okay and fine. And there was a real disconnect for me with that. And then when the hospice care was coming to help him, and this is not an individual's fault, probably it's more this organization that we had, but they would send a different nurse every time. And that was very difficult too, because it's exhaustive to have to tell the new person who's coming to the door all the problems that, my dad has and how he likes things done and what needs to happen for him and where his bed sore is and all the kinds of things that they have to do when they come in. So at one point, I just gave up on the hospice system and just decided to pack his bed sore myself and do the changing of his bed sore myself and the dressing. And, that was very challenging for us.
Was there a point early on where the family got together and said, okay, I can do this easily, this is my skill set? Did you try to divide it up, or was...
We're a small family, so it's just my sister and myself, my mom and my dad, and we had one outside caregiver who was a consistent caregiver to assist us. My sister is married with kids and doesn't live in LA, so I'm the one who was boots on the ground, basically, because I had a flexible lifestyle, didn't have anything tying me down to a particular place other than like my own desire to live somewhere and do my life, and so I decided to put that on hold and come back and help my dad.
Well, let's talk about these two photos that are downstairs. So I don't know how far apart they were. It looks like your dad is a little more.
Yeah, the one on the left is earlier on in his last year. I would say that's probably like, I don't know, somewhere between January and June, and then the one on the right is actually Thanksgiving holiday. So that's much closer to his death day.
So, what do you think that these are your sister's kids that they got out of watching this sort of very natural process of his decline? Some people try to hide things from kids, but they seem active participants here, playing him music. And
yeah, my sister actually did a really good job of bringing them up to spend time with him as much as she could on the weekends. Again, they don't live in town, so it is it's a trek. But she did make an effort to have them be involved with him. And what I saw with them at these young ages was that they both really wanted to help care for him. On the image on the left, he was still able to go upstairs to his bedroom. That was, like I said, in the beginning of his final year. And so Owen, who's in that photo with him on the left, and Ethan, who's on the right photo on the far right, they would both love to help him walk up the stairs, assist him with getting dressed after his showers. Like the photo shows on the right, they would serenade him during his nap time. And, I think that they just really wanted to be helpful to him in whatever way they could. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I haven't talked to them to see if they really recognized his degradation over time during their visits. But they were there for his death, and they were present. This is all part of the human life cycle. So I don't think in our family we've ever tried to hide that from anybody, or, my dad is Egyptian. I mean, ancient Egyptian culture is like embracing death, right? Mm-hmm. And I also have a background in death. I'm actually, I have a license for undertaking. So I've been around death on a daily basis and have experienced that. And so for me, it's just another important part of our existence here, or non-existence, I guess.
I did not know that about you. All right. So this one and the next one, you were talking about how roles change. I'm assuming your dad was a big guy. He was probably the man, and now here's your mom helping him dress. And there's a certain point that power dynamic changes, and I think some of your photos downstairs show that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about when you're dealing with patients, there's a certain point where all of a sudden you can't really talk to the patient, you have to talk to a family member.
Absolutely. And I think, again, Safi, you're doing such a great job, really fantastic job expressing what your family went through. I think one of the things is sort of this idea that no one is really fully prepared. I mean, no one's prepared. I mean, I think of the other extreme. I mean, who's really prepared for a baby? It's like, oh my God, it's a baby, you know what I mean? Death is harder than that, and process, particularly when it's a long, drawn-out process. I mean, I think that's what makes it extra hard, because it's not something like, tomorrow it's going to go away and I'll be able to, wake up refreshed or something. It's grinding, and you see that in the family. They're tired. They want help. They're trying to find an answer. They're often neglecting their own health as well as they're going through the process. And I think, commonly you'll see the family dynamics begin to change a little bit. I've had talks with the palliative care group about advanced care directive as an example, and who's going to be more involved in the care, particularly early on. And I was saying, well, I think one of the challenges with chronic disorders like Parkinson's disease is the family dynamics change for a lot of different reasons. People move away, people have family, and it's. I always learned so much about the family, about who, has more time or whatever, right? These people, no one has necessarily more time, but people stepping up to take that role, and there's sometimes handoffs happening because the mother is getting tired, or this person's getting tired. So you're seeing not just the patient, but you're seeing this huge dynamics happening with the family, in that they're trying to sustain this, and keep it going. There is no answer. There is no right way to do this. That's probably one of the hardest discussions I have with people, because on one hand you're trying to say it's kind of going to be organic. It's going to be who's available, who's not available to try to help. Unfortunately, in this country, we don't have very many resources to get help for people at home, unlike other countries, which is really a sad state that we're in. There's a lot of problems with our medical system. That's one big one, which is really not having respite care or things that give, not enough anyway, to really give families a break. And so, we see all sorts of dynamics. Some are more successful than others. And obviously that plays out on how well the patient does. Having a better kind of dynamic is going to help the patient live for a much longer time. There's no doubt about that. So I think it's, there is no one way to do it. I think, you obviously learn from looking at other families and how they can do it. I think, as I mentioned before, I don't think you can have too much social support. Keeping the family dynamics together, obviously you love one another, and then getting more help when you can, that you can't do it all. It's not sustainable. Sometimes my job is really to tell the person, okay, you need a break, okay? You need to stop doing what you're doing. We need to get some help in here for you because you can't do this anymore. That's the sort of thing that you become kind of the advocate, not just for the patient, but the family members as well, to make sure that they get enough help to be able to sustain this very difficult situation.
How many years were they married?
50.
So I love this picture.
Yeah, this was taken on their 50th anniversary.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about it. It just kind of gives me chills. I just love.
Well, I'm just so happy he made it to that day, because that's their anniversary is December 23rd, and my dad died on the first day of the new year. So he just literally made it to their 50th anniversary, and then left. But it was a very special day. And if you do go through the exhibit downstairs and you do the audio portion of the exhibit, you will hear about that day. I don't want to give it away because it's kind of the best audio down there.
So how was your mom after 50 years of
I mean, it was an adjustment, after my dad passed.
Yeah.
A huge adjustment. Her identity had changed. My identity with the world had changed. But for her, I mean, this is her life partner who she had been with for, longer than I've been alive. And you have to figure out who you are again once you lose that person. I can't speak for her, so I don't know, but that's my interpretation of what I was watching,
Have you seen family, I don't want to use the term failing, but come up against this or other long-term illnesses and just they kind of collapse? It's a lot of responsibility if you've had an easy life up till then.
It is, and again, you sort of see the whole spectrum. I think most of the patients that I've had, have had fairly good social support and family dynamics. But when you're married to someone, when they say, death do you part, they're not kidding. Having illnesses are hard, particularly if being the spouse, you become the caregiver. And I don't think anyone is always, no one's prepared for this, right? And so I think you shouldn't be surprised to see the whole gamut of responses. Some people are very angry, and they're angry at the patient, right? Because I don't want to do this. I didn't sign up for this. We definitely see that. People, family falling apart, sometimes absent family members, they don't want to get involved. So I think, our job, there's a lot of frustration with that, I think, within the family, and to see that you try to be as supportive as you can and recognize that, families have issues as well. They're doing the best they can. And again, I think trying to be as supportive as you can. And again, listening to the family where they might need some more help, some counseling to get through it. Because as you said, Ted, it's really not, a disorder of one person. It's really a disorder of
Affects everybody.
It
Yeah.
affects everybody. And I think the sooner that I think you can get that message on board, particularly when I go through a diagnosis, I really do encourage as much as possible the family to come on in so we can start talking to get more familiar with it. Again, information is knowledge. And I think in this case, helping to prepare, understand what to expect, it helps. It's not perfect, but I think it helps and sort of start kind of laying out what, kind of what to expect. And I think, again, this is where palliative care, I think, the field of palliative care has helped us really kind of reimagine or rethink how we manage chronic care, chronic disorders, and how to navigate that better so that we're not so reactionary to symptoms as they appear, but more try to be more proactive and kind of laying out kind of the bigger picture, the landscape of a chronic disorder and what I need to be thinking about in the future. So not just now, but what to expect later and how to navigate this a bit better. I think introducing palliative care to neuro has been certainly in my experience, has been extremely helpful, and it's something that I think as a field is again helping us manage Parkinson's disease as an example, but any chronic disorder. So I like to think that things are getting better and that we're having these discussions a lot sooner, and as I said, kind of planning out the landscape a little bit better of what to expect and how to prepare.
All right, I'm going to go back to one of the photos we passed. So we talked about this one a little bit when I first saw your show, because it's so, him looking straight at the camera that way. But I think, again, I keep relating back to my brother, who would not want to have been shown like that. But, so can you talk about this? Where was it, and what are you seeing in this photo? It's such a strong gaze in this picture.
I mean, he's well aware that I'm there with the camera. He's confronting the viewer. This was our reality. I mean, my dad had become my child. He was wearing diapers, adult diapers, and that's because with Parkinson's, he can't control his muscles. He can't always make it on time to the bathroom. It's a precautionary measure, obviously, and I don't know really what to say about that, but this was when he was still able to go upstairs, so this is before July of his final year, and this was part of our everyday process. I mean, we're just documenting his journey. So.
Did you feel at the end, because he's obviously, there's something about this gaze that's so strong, and then you look at some of the older pictures where it's not as focused. Is there a certain point where he would interact with the camera and then he sort of stopped interacting with the camera ever?
I think because the camera was so much a part of our journey that he, there are times when he just is doing whatever he's doing and he's not concerned with the camera. I wouldn't say he's concerned with the camera here, but he's acknowledging the camera. And again, he's posing for me. I mean, this is not like I'm catching him in an off moment. He's posing for me. So there are moments where we would do an actively, pose, like, stop, I want to make a photo of you in this moment. And then there were moments where I was just documenting what was happening. So, and also in some of those that I think you're referring to where he's not as aware or seemingly aware of the lens, some of those moments might have been in a moment of dementia, or might have been in a moment where he was not as, what's the right way to express
alert,
it?
or
maybe, or in this same realm as me.
Got it.
His reality was
Same
different than
realness.
mine on certain occasions, and again, like, I would never shut that down. I would always embrace that and quiz him about his experience. Downstairs, there's another audio you will hear about when my mom and I, Rosa was not there that day. She was our outside caregiver, and it was just my mom and myself taking care of him. And we had moved him after a nap out of his bed. And we had a hospital bed in our den for him when he could no longer go upstairs. We had moved him out of the hospital bed into the wheelchair. I was going to take him into the kitchen and give him dinner, I think. And my mom started to straighten the sheets. I had him on the wheelchair, and she was straightening his sheets on the bed, and he said, whoa, 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 whoa. And my mom stopped what she was doing, and we started asking him what's going on, and he said, be careful of the frogs. And obviously we didn't see frogs in his bed, but he saw frogs in his bed, and I started asking him about it, and he told me he saw 8 frogs in his bed. And to me, that was kind of like the beauty of the different realities. Like, he was at times in these really poetic, kind of beautiful places. I asked him if he was afraid. One time, this is another audio you'll hear downstairs, I had put him to bed, I was holding his hand, I asked him if he was afraid, and he said no. And I didn't say afraid of what, I just was asking him if he was afraid. And in my head, I was asking him if he was afraid to die. And he said no, and then I asked him again a few minutes later, and he said, I'm afraid of the river. And I said, what river? And the LA River, the Nile, what river are you talking about? And he said, the river in the backyard. Tomorrow I'll show you. And we had buried a lot of our pets in the backyard. So to me, that kind of meant like he was aware of his own impending, death. But just these really poetic kind of places he was in his moments of dementia.
So, last question for you, and then I have a last question for you. Talk about just the idea of doing this project over several years was it a stress reliever for you? Did it help you deal with all of this? What did you get out of it?
Yeah, for me as a documentarian, this is how I process the world. I had been living in New York around the millennium and was there for September 11th, and that's actually what launched me into my life as a mortician. But, I process the world through my camera. So for me, this was a natural thing to do with my dad so that I could understand what was happening with him. And I think for him, it was also a natural thing to do to kind of understand his own journey. What else was I going to say to you? It functioned as like a bridge, I think I said that before, between our kind of two realities. It kept him kind of grounded in what is my version of the world. And, I think it staved off maybe some of the progression for him just because it was this thing he could wake up. It gave him something positive to think about instead of focusing on what was being taken away from him through this disease. It gave him something positive to look forward to each day. I think that's my response.
And if anybody has any questions, we have a couple minutes left for that. There's a microphone up here. And your last question for all the new students, what made you want to pick your specialty?
I can't say exactly why. I think it's all about mentorship and having been exposed to people that you admire or you appreciate or you like the way they think and you like the patient population that you're working with. I learn a lot from my patients. I certainly learn a lot from families and how, hardship is difficult, but it also brings out some amazing humanness, these sorts of things, right? The ability to share things about your family. And I learned a lot from that, and I really enjoy that. I enjoy working with older individuals. I learn so much from them. And I think the other thing, I find Parkinson's disease is such an interesting, complex disorder for the reasons I mentioned. How much cognition really expresses itself in a lot of different ways. It interacts with movement, interacts with mood, and it's a challenge. It's something that we're still trying to understand and do a better job. So there's that challenge component. But I think most of all, it's the patients I've really enjoyed working with. I think they're, just an amazing group of people and amazing group of families.
Any questions for the doctor or our artist? Wow. Dr. Shaft, would you like to say anything?
I have a comment and reflection, and then I know sometimes it takes a while for people to think of questions. This has been very moving, and Safi, I just want to thank you for this project. And I think one of the things that's so meaningful to me is that when our students go to the clinic or to the hospital, they hear a story and they may understand something about that person's illness and their experience. But when they see this work, I think, Dr. Petzinger, you acknowledge that these are things we can't learn in any other way. This is a way to understand differently about a person's and a family's experience of this illness. And so you've given us this gift, and I think you've reflected on how this is a piece of students' education that I think can only happen in this way. So it makes me feel like really grateful that we can do events like this and bring artists, patients, artists, caregivers to our community and understand this experience of illness. And I think I heard you say, and I think you're exactly right, that this makes us better doctors, but I think it makes us better people. What we learn, I learn so much, and we learn from our patients all the time, and I think I feel like I become better at being a human being through our work, and this especially just feels like a real gift. So thank you both.
Just to follow up with that, I think one of the things that I commonly hear from patients from Parkinson's for sure, and that is, again, the issue of not having a voice, not being able to communicate. And I think your dad definitely saw a chance or opportunity through you, which is, what a brilliant way to communicate in such a unique and very detailed, right? It's got a very granular feel. You can feel it, can't you, right? That voice coming through with just these experiences, right? He had a voice, right? And he knew how to do it, right? And this is the best voice you can have right now, these experiences, his life, through this camera. That is as powerful as you can get. You did a fantastic job for your dad.
Thank you, and also thank you for your comments. I really appreciate that. And if we have a way to channel this horrible family experience into something positive, then that's the best way to do it for us. Because, my dad, like I said, he was an educator in life, and he left me with the legacy of turning this work into what I thought it should be and getting it out into the world in the way that I thought it would best honor his journey. And I'm thankful to him for allowing me to tell his story and trusting me to tell his story, and for my family's support with sharing this with the world, because again, this is very vulnerable work. This is us standing naked in front of the classroom, sharing our personal life. And it's very challenging and scary, and the fact that people are willing to listen and learn from it and are moved by it, that it's impacting people, that's been the huge return from sharing our story. So I thank you all for listening and coming today, and seeing the exhibit downstairs and taking the time to do the audio element with it, because I think it's really important. Those are from my journal entries for the most part. Also, there is some live audio of my dad, but most of it is from my journal entries during the caregiving experience. And again, this was a first-time experience for us, and that was stuff that I kept during the journey, not knowing that I would ever share that with the world. That was just a girl and her book, trying to figure out what was going on with her dad. And I think it adds a whole deeper level for you as far as what the family goes through when they're experiencing this for the first time. So,
Great. Well, thank you all for coming. Congratulations to all you first-year students for getting here. That's quite an accomplishment. And we hope you loved your burrito. So.